Turtle Logic and the University of Life, Chapter 14, Garden of the One-Liners, Part 2. Morning broke in through the white curtains and frilly lace like an ocean wave hitting the docks on a summer's day. I got going quick, grabbed my class list, and moved into the hallway. Looking for my list, as I read it, I read the words, feeling, emotions, and effect, printed on the bold ink across the paper. "This way, sir," I heard come from across the hall at the top of the stairs. It was Arthur, of course, beckoning the way. "Downstairs, 2 doors to the left," he said in a calm and reassuring voice. I arrived at the next class refreshed and walked in and sat down in my seat. Soon after, Alfred came in through the door as well. The classroom was very simple. It was kind of like the classroom you would see in an elementary school. Little chairs and light oak wood teacher's desk and a long blackboard fitted across the front wall. Alfred approached the board and quickly wrote out the words that were printed on my course list: feelings, emotion, and effect. And then he began to speak. "So many times," he said, "I have found it useful to have learned about emotions. I was not taught any of this when I was a little turtle, and I went through so many experiences in life completely confused when it came to understanding, managing, and living with feelings. I was also in a complete disadvantage when someone would flash their knowledge of feelings. Like so many, I learned to be respectful when someone shifted, saying, 'I think you are being unfair,' and 'No, you are being unfair.' When I entered a graduate school on counseling, my advisor asked me what a feeling was. Whatever I said to him, I do not recall, but he told me that I needed to get into a counseling program quick to fix my woeful ignorance. My master's paper was written upon anger. It was a resource paper for teachers. I come a long way in a year. That paper, like my early training in counseling, was a major turning point in my life. It marked the path that led to this information, which I think is as a plumber's version of emotions, like a description of emotions that even an uncomplicated guy might be able to understand. So, if you are confused about the role of emotions in your life, here we go with some of the answers. Before I launch into the guts of the matter, let me settle an important point. Feelings are feelings, and feelings are not thoughts. People use the words feelings when they are speaking of thoughts. I think they learn this along the way, but also I think that many people are somewhat intimidated by the word feeling, and thus people who use it are often treated as more believable. Whatever. Let me set the record straight right up front. As I move along, you may get the impression that feelings are a bit more real than thoughts. I believe that this is true. Feelings are very real. They happen. They exist even when people say they are not there. People can misunderstand a feeling, mislabel them, but the underlying feeling is still present. Feelings are very objective. Researchers know that babies are feeling what babies are feeling in the womb. I can measure the contents of your bloodstream and thus measure and describe some of your feelings. Now, take thoughts. I cannot do that with your thoughts. Thoughts or thought processes seem to be much more vague. I can think one thing in the morning and think the opposite in the afternoon. I can fully believe that which I fully disbelieve in 10 minutes. I think of thoughts a little the same way that I think of data in a computer. Words, 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 but feelings seem very solid. I believe it is silly to trust your thoughts and be hesitant about your feelings. Still, that seems to be what you do. I feel that, or I feel like. Those are some of the more misleading statements in your language, your human language. Use the word feel for a feeling and use the word think for a thought. I feel that you are cheating me on a nice sentence, but critically defective. The feeling is left out of it. The sentence should read, I feel angry when I think you are cheating me. Now the feeling has been put back in. Notice that the feeling that was left out is pretty important. Learn to use thought words and separate them from your feeling words. I found this to significantly clear up a great amount of confusion. Thought words are think, believe, recall, imagine, guess, I have a hunch. Most thought words are followed by words like that, I believe that you are. I think that if you hear the word feel followed by that, we are not talking about feelings. Now let's look at the notion of words and symbols. The counseling profession taught me that all psychology was based on the wheel. So here it is. Alfred turned to the board and wrote, thought process triggers, word symbols trigger feelings and emotions. The sentence was taught as words and symbols evoke feelings, which evoke thought processes, which are full of words and symbols. I think of words and symbols, they have spelling and use letters, and when spoken have sounds. Other symbols may not have letters, may have only sounds or just gestures. Objects can be a symbol too. Studying general semantics years ago, I learned the words do not have meaning. People have meanings, and people use words to try to communicate the meaning they have. A dictionary, I recall, is a history book of the meanings that people have used for a word. I have learned to never argue about the meaning of a word, but to ask the user what they meant by it. Who knows if they have the same meaning that I have for a certain word? The same is true for all symbols. They mean different things to different people. There is no right meaning for a word or a symbol. I suggest you get used to this idea. Still, all those words and symbols evoke feelings. Yes, the feelings come first. I guess this is pretty basic to the way your brain works. Fast. If I show you a symbol of danger, your body starts to respond to that danger before the good old cortex decides what to do. Now remember, safety and your little friend the lizard, apparently your body does not wait to think. It moves. My favorite word for this evoking is the word trigger. Now this is the world. In this world, triggers take the shape of those annoying little round balls with spikes that we see from time to time. These triggers, as I call them, are events. They are real events. If you will hear me talk, you will hear me talk a lot about them while you're here. For me, a trigger is simply a little thing that kicks off something that may be a lot bigger. The turtle stopped talking at that point and looked around the room. He was taking a pause to let the information catch up to itself. I could tell that he knew he was throwing out a lot of stuff out there and wanted to stop and see if it was seeping into the cracks in my brain where it was intended to go. I did remember those triggers, how they came from the bushes on the path, their sharp little spikes that came so close to gouging my leg. I thought they were a pretty big deal, but as Alfred was explaining, maybe they are not. Alfred then continued. Now, let's take a look at emotions, feelings, and affect. While I will define those more later, here is my short description. A feeling is an event in a person's body that can be strong or weak or in between. I use the word feelings and emotions in the same way. I think we have enough trouble getting the idea without splitting hairs over the differences between them. Affect is a word often used in the medical world to refer to the feelings that a person is experiencing. A nurse might make a note that a person's affect was agitated, which seems to me the same as the patient felt agitated. Most people won't run into that word, affect. Now, these events in the body have an effect on the brain. Often, the event is chemical, and the chemicals, hormones, etc., cause all sorts of shifts in the brain. Still, the important idea is that the event, the feelings, trigger a thought process or a chain of thoughts. Differing events trigger different thought processes. When a person is angry, some parts of the cortex are shut down and others are awakened. When a person is scared, other parts are affected. I think it is fascinating to watch people when their emotions are strong and to witness how different they are the memories available to them in one state of emotion or another. Now, keeping all of this in mind, let's look at the thought processes. I think a thought process as strings of symbols, like sentences. They start, have a middle, and come to an end. Paragraphs are, to me, a little like a single thought process. If I'm trying to make a point, I will start, say some more, and then finally reach an end. I don't think of thought processes as having any sort of reality to them per se. I can think of a green elephant, but that doesn't make a green elephant appear. I can think that you are a crook, but that doesn't mean that you're a crook. However, thought processes are full of symbols and words. That's the way our cortex works and stores things. Those wonderful words and symbols may trigger new emotions, and round we go, day in, day out, all through our lives. Fascinating and simple. My profession told me that all kinds of therapy work on one or more parts of the wheel. Giving people medicine attempts to interfere with the emotions that are triggered by the symbols and words. Psychoeducation or teaching, and that is what I am doing here, tries to change the thought processes that are kicked off by the emotions. It also attempts to change the word and symbols those thought processes contain. Behavior modification often seeks to change the link between a word or a symbol and the emotions that are evoked. Again, pretty simple, but fascinating. Now, let's look at the simple of all emotions, attraction. This class will lead you to some interesting places, and so let me start with something fun. The simplest of all emotions is the emotion of attraction. There are lots of words for this emotion, but what I want you to do is experience it now. Think of all the foods in your refrigerator and think of whether they attract you or repel you. Just observe yourself and this one dimension of attraction. Now, think of attraction as a measurable scale. Let's use the plus 10 and minus 10 on the scale. Absolute powerful attraction is a plus 10. A neutral feeling is a 0. An absolute and powerful feeling of getting away from it are a minus 10. Try this on a menu at a restaurant. I bet you can score everything. Now look around at everything and everyone in your life. See all your scores? We often gather a lot of high plus score objects to us and put a lot of high negative things in the garage. This is a feeling. Ask yourself, do feelings stay the same? Nope. Is there any right or wrong about these scores? Nope. Does anyone have the same scores as you? Nope. Welcome to the world of feelings. They are part of you. Imagine, unique to you and cannot be wrong. They just are. This is the best definition for feelings or emotions that I can come up with. I give this to you because I think it is important that you know whether feelings you come up with are valid. I want you to relax when it comes to understanding your feelings. At this point, I will give 3 examples that illustrate all parts of the definition. Then I will describe the 4 prime emotions. By the way, remember that these are my definitions, not any official definitions. All this and $1.50 will get you a cup of coffee. So take it or leave it. In the course of your journey through life, you will ultimately make your own conclusions. What I tell you now, what you will experience, will be determined by you and no one else. Now, on to emotions. An emotion has 5 distinct qualities, and those qualities are facts, amount, consciousness, label, and value. An emotion is an event in your body. It actually happens. It is measurable. A person does not even need to be conscious to have emotions. An emotion is not a figment of the imagination. Since it is an event, an emotion exists in time. They start and they end. It is possible to identify what babies feel even before they are born. The primary emotion they feel is pleasure, by the way. Most emotions are chemical. All emotions act as if they are chemical. The point here is that emotions do not click on and off. An emotion starts, grows bigger, and then may decrease until it finally ends. Emotions always have an amount of intensity to them. The question is never, are you angry or not angry? Yes or no. The question is, how angry are you? How angry are you? And now. As I mentioned in the simple emotion of attraction, I find it useful to put a number on the level of an emotion. 0 means none. I think of 5s as a maximum. So to accurately speak of emotions, one can say, I was scared at a level 5 for a bit, but it decreased a while ago to about a 3. Now I am just a bit nervous, perhaps a 1. A decrease in intensity is often called a release, or is spoke of as relief. remember this for later. There is a component of awareness that comes with emotions. One can be completely unaware of an emotion ripping through the body, or one can be aware until an emotion reaches a certain level of intensity. Or some even can bring an emotion to your awareness. Some people are almost completely unaware of their own emotions. Some are exquisitely sensitive. One confusion about emotions is the difference between an emotion and an event, and the emotion as an experience. You see, it's possible for an emotion to begin at one time and to start affecting your behavior while you are still not aware of it. At some point, you become aware of the emotion, and at that point, your subjective awareness begins. That awareness may continue till the level of that emotion is quite a bit lower. Then the event may continue a bit after you are no longer aware. If I ask you about your experience and I measure your emotional experience, reports may be quite different. Another very difficult problem is that I can be having an emotion, I can be displaying a sign of an emotion, others can observe the signs, and I can be completely unaware. Others may be much more aware of my feelings than I am. In many ways, I'm an open book about some of my emotions. I can try to keep them hidden, but feelings can be hard to hide. When we speak about emotions, we are really reporting on them. We are labeling what we are feeling. We can mislabel feelings quite easily. When my professor asked me to describe an emotion, and when I could not, he handed me a large list of words people have used for emotions. I found this quite useful. I will give these to you later in the class. Finally, emotions have value in your human culture. Some emotions are described at certain times as undesirable and others. Some emotions are considered bad emotions. For example, I was taught that all emotions just get in the way. In contrast, I have learned that life is greatly more enjoyable when I treasure the emotions that move in and me and others. Before I go to work sharing my thoughts about the big emotion, I would like to give you some examples that I hope will illustrate all the parts of the definition. Many would not think that hunger is an emotion, but I think it is an excellent starting place. Hunger is an event in your body. It comes and goes. It gets stronger and weaker. It chemically raises your blood sugar levels in your body. Note how awareness is involved. Aren't there times when you have worked for a while and then suddenly become aware of how hungry you are? Truly, you've been hungry for some time, but it just wasn't noticed. Wow, am I famished? I can eat a horse. This is the exclamation of a person who has been distracted from the slow-growing feeling of hunger. Heck, I can remain hungry for some time during dinner, and I may still be eating while my hunger goes away. Most humans do not have any trouble reporting on their hunger, but look at the issue of social value. Ask yourself, what is the value of being hungry 1 hour before dinner time? I've found it is a good time not to snack even though my stomach is growling. When dinner is served, the hunger is suddenly of high value. Aren't you hungry, dear? What's the matter? Thirst is a similar emotion in that it happens, grows larger, and then grows smaller. Chemicals are at work here as well. The question is not, are you thirsty, but how thirsty are you? I think thirst has something to do with the intercellular water levels. It's an event. Again, a person can get thirsty without noticing it. Think of how taverns take advantage of awareness. They show customers pictures of running water, of salty products, of even put popcorn out on the tables, all to bring you awareness of your feelings of thirst. If you are only slightly thirsty when you arrive, the scene will raise the level of your thirst and your awareness of it. Most people are clear about their reporting of thirst and speak clearly. And again, the social value of being thirsty is pretty simple. In most situations, I think being thirsty is socially acceptable. But do take notice that a person may say they are thirsty for a cold beer when it is not exactly the emotion of thirst, but a matter of desire for a particular taste or temperature. The label thirsty is being used differently there. Now let's get into some fun. This time about alertness. I think of this as the feeling of being awake or sleepy. The more alert you are, the wider your eyes are, and the more you tend to want to move. The less alert you are, the more you yawn, look sleepy, and tend to move less. Alertness has to do with the reticular activating system in your brain. It happens. It is an event. The feeling of alertness goes up and down during the day and all night. It becomes more or less intense, again, a chemical event. Most adult humans have about a 90-minute cycle, alert at some point, and then much slower about 45 minutes later. Dreams take place in the alert part of your sleep process. A person can be sleepy and yawning while they think they are wide awake. Here's an emotion that is quite visible to others and yet may be out of our awareness. Here's a story I tell people I meet on the path. Imagine an 8-year-old boy. It's about 7:30 in the evening. He is yawning. A parent says to him, "Are you sleepy?" The boy jerks, widens his eyes, and says, "Nope, definitely not." Here's a report about an emotion that is obviously out of sync with the actual emotion. He is sleepy, but says he is not. People can lie about their emotions quite easily. What is going on here? Well, the boy is actually answering a different question than the one being asked. He is answering the question, "Do you want to be sent to bed?" His answer is now obviously valid, where before it was confusing. My point is that reports of emotions can be and are normally widely different from the emotion being felt or being observed. And what of the social value of alertness? During a school class or a church, yawning is frowned upon. On Christmas Eve, being wide awake could be a handicap if you're a kid waiting for his presents. How about the need to pee? Not often thought of as an emotion, still it has all the characteristics. The need does happen in your body as an event. It involves chemical charges in the tissues of and surrounding your bladder. It grows more and more intense over time. One can need to pee for quite some time before one becomes aware of it. As an older turtle, I'm quite aware of the phenomenon in the early morning. Sometimes the awareness can seem to increase the intensity. But now I want to introduce another point about reporting. Let's say a friend is picking me up for a drive. He asks if I need to use the bathroom. I say no. He says that there will not be a place to stop for the next 2 hours. And now I change my report. I say yes. The report of an emotion can change based on the change in the situation, while there is no change in the subjective feeling. The social value of this emotion is also fascinating. I think of how one person saying, "I need to visit the facilities," can trigger many people getting up and going together. Let us see where we have gotten so far. Here is a handout. Read it and use it as you see fit. I suggest that you keep this one in a safe place for yourself to be able to review it later. Alfred then handed out a piece of paper that summarized his ideas about emotions, and it read just like this. Emotions are not thoughts, beliefs, or ideas. Emotions are triggered within a person, never caused by the external world. Different emotions lead to different thoughts. Emotions happen, they have an intensity that varies. Emotions and the report of them can be quite different. Emotions are there whether you are aware of them or not. Other people can sometimes see our emotions which we are aware of. Society has all sorts of rules around emotions. Alfred then stopped and looked around the room, gazing well beyond where I was sitting. "Here is a rule you can pretty much take to the bank," he said, as his eyes grew larger and the tone of his voice slowed. "All emotions are valid, and no one can make you feel anything." While I was looking at the paper, Alfred was busily writing on the blackboard again. This time he wrote the words fear, anger, grief, and joy. He then turned back to the room and spoke into the imaginary crowd. "Now, I want to add the 4 prime emotions of fear, anger, grief, and joy. Why only 4? Well, these are the ones that give most people lots of trouble, both of having them, dealing with them, and communicating about them. Also, there are 4 unique chemical processes here, one for each. There may be many words for fear, but only one chemical. The same is true for anger, grief, and joy. Since there are different chemicals, one can have more than one of these emotions at a time. I believe it quite possible to have large doses of all 4 emotions. What would you report on? Then I feel scared that my anger makes me so sad that I feel happy. What a mix. But It is possible. Also, I want you to remember that emotions have intensity. For low levels of fear, people often use words like nervous, uneasy, or uncomfortable. For high levels, people use words like terror. For low levels of anger, people speak of testy, ticked off, buggy, growly. For high levels, they speak of rage. For low levels of grief, people say blue or moody. For high levels, they speak of irreconcilable grief. For low levels of joy, people speak of feeling good. For high levels, they refer to ecstasy. Later, I will hand out a list of words used for different emotions. For now, let's look at the first of these emotions, fear. Alfred continued his presentation. Fear is the first emotion. It is primitive in its function, and it is a normal function of the old brain. Remember, safety and the lizard for the psycho issues, social issues of fear. The primary chemical of fear is adrenaline, sometimes called morphine. While many parts of the body produce this hormone, its major source is part of the adrenal gland in the middle of the back. When the brain interprets the situation as deserving fear, it squirts a dose of adrenaline into your bloodstream, which carries it on in less than a second to all parts of your body, to your fingertips, everything. Since the brain is filled with blood, whole new memories become available and others are forgotten while adrenaline floods in. This is how the emotion of fear affects the thinking process. The feeling of fear functions to prepare the body for survival. The chemistry flows when the old brain, your lizard brain that is, senses an intimate fear of life. As you may have realized, this part of the body can misunderstand things easily. Still, it prepares things. The chemical shuts down non-necessary functions like digestion and human immune system. It empties useless weight, bowels and bladder, and it prepares for last-ditch efforts. It is designed to be very short-lived, 20 minutes or less. It is a chemical experience that the gazelle experiences when it notices the approaching lion. In your culture, this is a terrible problem, as most of you live in a short-term survival-like status for years and you don't even know it. Humans are not designed for this. Humans are not designed for this anymore. There was a long time ago when this was a real tool for survival, but not anymore. The experience of adrenaline is very quick and profound. Consider you're driving a car peacefully when you hear a police siren directly behind you. That sensation in your body is the adrenaline flooding in. The word flooding is a good one for this experience. The feeling is not fun. If you were to receive an injection of adrenaline, your body tends to go, "Urgh." It is not pleasant. People speak of an adrenaline high, but that is different from fear and results from other chemicals. And once the adrenaline hits your body, it takes at least 20 minutes for your body to filter it out of your blood system. Okay, I thought to myself, that must be why the time out period is no less than 20 minutes. It takes that long to get calm. I pondered this thought for a moment. It made sense to me. Then Alfred broke back through my veil of my shallow thought. You're driving peacefully. Hear a siren. Have the adrenaline flooding experience. And then notice the police are after someone else. 15 minutes later, you are still reacting to the adrenaline in your body. For that length of time, your body continues to experience the effects of that hormone. The experience is pretty strong, but the body habituates. It gets used to it quickly, and so people often lose their awareness of the adrenaline in, say, 6 minutes. Yet it is still there, affecting thinking and a lot of other things. This issue of timing is pretty important. What it means is that after a person receives a fright, they will not return to normal for at least 20 minutes, even though they will experience the feeling as going away. What is even more interesting is that the part of the human body that produces adrenaline seems extremely over-engineered. It can go on producing it forever. It never gets tired. It seems to be so over-engineered that it can produce enough adrenaline right now to kill you. Adrenaline is remarkably toxic. Too much of it will stop various organs from functioning, like your heart, and your body easily is easily capable of producing enough to do the job. It doesn't normally because adrenaline production is in the hands of the survival mechanism of your old brain, your lizard. It doesn't want to kill you, as its function is to keep you alive at all costs. Still, people can and do die of fear. The first time I heard of this was in stories of prisoners in concentration camps in the Second World War. People would receive a shock and drop over dead. How would this happen? Here's the story. The turtle leaned back on his simple wooden teacher's desk there in the front of the classroom and began to tell his story. In your world, in the 1950s, some researchers were interested in rehabilitating or getting used to the effects of adrenaline. They found that people accustomed to high levels could perform remarkably well. Soldiers for years were trained using fear techniques, and the researchers were interested in the effects. What they did was to get a large number of white rats. First, they determined how much adrenaline would kill a rat, let's say 55 units. Then they gave all the rats the equivalent of 50 units daily for 2 weeks, just less than the lethal dose. At the end of that time, the previous killing dose of 55 did not kill the rat. It now took 95 units to kill. The rat bodies had become habituated or immune to a dose that would have killed them before. So now they gave the rats 90 units of adrenaline daily for 2 weeks, and at the end of that time, it took 135 units to kill the rats. So they tried 130 units, and so on and so forth. They finally reached an upper limit beyond which the rats could not survive. The number was 450 units of adrenaline, around 9 times the dose that would have killed the rats in the first place. They had now a small collection of rats living at this high level of adrenaline. The rats were not exactly normal. They had stopped reproduction activities. Their immune systems were very weak. Much of their behavior was quite odd, but they were alive. This gave the researchers the analogy of soldiers. Soldiers have traditionally been habituated to high levels of adrenaline. Many years ago, these soldiers were called berserkers and were highly valued as extremely useful warriors who fought with wild, unrestrained aggression. While in the military, I heard that other countries had used these techniques to train soldiers. A friend of mine described such a soldier running across a landing zone during a firefight. The soldier was carrying a heavy M60 rifle he had grabbed. He had no feet. He was running on the stump bones of his legs. The study also pointed out that people could live with very high levels of adrenaline and not be aware of it. A person could be in great fear and not know it. There are many, many tests of how high a level of fear people are living with. These study tests often let a person score how many stressful events that had happened to them recently. Such events as death of a family member, loss of a job, arrest, etc., increased basic stress levels for months. The Polynesians know that when a man loses a wife, it may take as much as a year for him to recover. This is consistent with bringing down the high level of adrenaline that his body will start to produce after the death. In your Western culture, such a man may be given a week off from work to recover, while in the Pacific Islands he may get his year. By the way, you may wonder what they did with all those surviving rats. Well, it was simple but quite interesting. They set up their cages in a room on tables. Then they created a large noise, a bang in the room. Every rat rolled over dead. You see, adrenaline is addictive. They were already living in the upper limit of their capacity, and the noise triggered another bit, which was too much. This is how the people in prison camps died. They were already at too high a level close to the lethal one, and the shock sent them over the limit. Thus I've learned that fear is addictive. That is, one source of fear adds to another. I also learned that one can live with high levels of fear and not be aware of it. High levels of adrenaline in your bloodstream and no conscious awareness of it can be a big problem. It seems easy and common for people to say, I'm not scared or fearful, when they have been fearful all their lives. So, what do you think of the social value of fear? Is it a good or bad emotion? To me, the amazing answer is that it is a very desirable emotion from the point of view of the human culture that you all come from. Your culture is, in my opinion, a control freak culture. To me, it seems that your culture wants people to be obedient and manageable. Thus, you use threat and tactics that cause fear in others everywhere and often in order to control them. Think of the terms fear of God as used in many religions. Think of the way police dress and act in threatening ways. Your human culture uses fear, since your culture likes obedience. When I went to teach school for the first time, it was to be a teacher. The more experienced teachers took me aside before the school lesson began to tell me the ropes. One piece of advice really stands out after all these years. If you try to make friends with your students in the first couple of days, you will pay for it. Scare the bejesus out of them for at least 4 days. Pile on the homework. If they look frightened, you're doing your job. Every couple I see along the path is, among other things, doing one specific thing wrong. They are using threat in an attempt to get love. I think this is foolish and is a direct result of the human culture's love affair with using the emotion of fear. Alfred looked on the board once again and pointed to the word anger. Anger is the next emotion. It is also primitive to its function. However, I think it is the most misunderstood of emotions and is talked about so casually that I am going to go slowly here. First, I want you to recall that emotions, feelings are events in the body. Realize that they are chemical in nature and that they involve an awareness and that they are about which you talk or report. And finally, realize that they have social value. I want you to know this because anger is the first of the emotions that has negative social value. You see, it is frequently reported incorrectly, thus most humans seem quite confused about it. I may change your view of anger, I may not, but I will share these views with you now, and we will see where we all end up. Now, norepinephrine or adrenaline, big words, this is the chemical that gives rise to anger and is secreted primarily by the adrenaline gland and injected into the bloodstream. Thus, its effects on the body is very quick. Like that of adrenaline triggered by fear, it saturates the brain in a split second. Well, let me share this with you. As I do with those I meet along the path. I want you to remember one question, and I want you to force yourself to go for a yes or no answer. Here's the question. When you feel anger, is it a pleasant experience or an unpleasant experience? Now just go for a yes or no. I hope this will be instructive. I thought for a moment, and I had to answer no. The turtle then continued. When I asked this question in class I was teaching last year, about 2 out of 3 said that anger was unpleasant, and about 1/3 saw anger as pleasant. The class had almost 120 students in it. If I was using that class to determine whether anger was pleasant or not, I don't think that would have been a good test. About 80 said unpleasant, and I didn't debate it. Lots of you in here will say that. About 40 said anger was pleasant, and so lots of you here will say that too. Now, how can this be? How could so many disagree? I have found this split to be pretty normal. Most people experience anger as an unpleasant and undesirable experience, while a large minority experience it as fun. Now, before I solve the puzzle for you, let me ask one more question. When you get angry, really angry, what is the longest that your anger has lasted? Seconds, minutes, hours? How long? Be honest with yourself, and I will explain what is going on. The people who experience anger as unpleasant describe their anger as lasting hours, days, weeks, and one guy even said, all my life. The people that experience anger as pleasant describe their anger as lasting 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 7 minutes, 12 minutes, but never longer than 15 minutes. Norepinephrine feels great, the turtle explained. I call it the Tony the Tiger emotion. If you got it in an injection, it would make you breathe deeply and show you deliciously. Wow, it nice. This endorphin can only last 15 minutes maximum. You see, the part of your body that produces it is very short functioning. After 10 or 15 minutes, it must rest. It cannot keep producing the hormone steadily. Now, these two pieces of data explain the answer that one-third of my class gave. Anger is a relatively short-term but pleasant experience. They are people who have learned that anger is an okay emotion. I think most of them are Irish. For the others, it's confusion. What explains the answer of the majority of my class, of the majority of people I've seen, and my original answers? When I was studying this material, I experienced what I called very unpleasant anger for a long time. Well, you already have the answer. What emotion can last forever and feels unpleasant? Sure, fear does. Most people are fearful of anger. When anger comes, they get fear at the same time. Their body secretes adrenaline and norepinephrine at the same time. And then in about 15 minutes, they are left with the adrenaline only and the thoughts that started the whole thing off. They're angry thoughts. Their hostility feels awful because those thoughts are accompanied by fear. But they have been calling this state anger. I told this to the guy who said, I've been angry all my life. He looked shocked and quiet for a while. Then he said, so I've been scared all my life. Damn, that makes sense. To help you really experience this difference between unpleasant anger and pleasant anger and unpleasant anger, I tell this story. There is an industry in the human world that takes advantage of this misunderstanding about anger and makes billions of dollars off of you all. They know that for most people, anger feels bad. They know the potential of the good feeling of anger, so they give it to you for $5 or $10. They know that in most Western nations, you are all taught that anger is free from the connection fear, if the anger is justified. This is a powerful rule for most people, and this industry takes advantage of it. They take us to a dark room, show us moving pictures on the wall in which somebody does bad things. Then, at the last moment, John Wayne or Jean-Claude Van Damme or some other hero beats the tar out of the bad guy, and most everyone in the audience experiences pure anger without fear. That gorgeous sensation you get in your body when the bad witch falls off the cliff in Snow White, when the maid Edwin stabs the Witch King. Oh, you can name many movies and cartoons. That wonderful sensation is called by norepinephrine. Ain't it cool? It hits your body, makes you cheer, makes you feel great. If it happens very close to the end of the film, you strut out of the theater, stride to your car, but it wears off before you make it to the restaurant. I recall the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark, where Spielberg puts the norepinephrine events too close together. The movie is just exhausting for most people. That adrenal gland can produce the first rush, but needs some rest time to produce the next. Get that film, play it, but stop for 10 minutes after each charged event. I think you may enjoy the movie more. This pattern became so clear to me that I used to tell my own little turtle stories by starting with how bad someone was. And it is also so clear to me that when someone finds me on the path and talks about how bad their partner is, they are just angry at them and are running the first part of the film to justify the anger they already feel. One of my great teachers used to say, to get angry at someone, first you must put them in the wrong. I've witnessed human politicians and military leaders in your human world doing this for years. The feeling of angry functions to raise a person's angry level in order to push through blocks. The chemical follows them when the chemical flows when the old brain, the lizard brain, senses something blocking it from achieving its goal. This is the feeling the lion feels when it sees a gazelle on the other side of the clearing. This is the feeling produced automatically when we all face frustration. If you want something and can't get it, you feel frustrated and the chemical of anger is produced. However, for most of you, the chemical of fear is also produced. In your human culture, the general idea seems to be that you should all contain your anger. That means you should not express it unless, of course, it is justified. Soldiers can express it, police can express it when it is proper, but many humans, and especially their children, are often taught that they are not supposed to express it. This is a funny thing because a large majority of parents express anger. Just ask their kids. I sometimes do. Here are my questions. When your daddy got angry, what did you do? List the things. When your mama got angry, what did you do? List those things. Now, when you get angry, what were you allowed to do? That is often an instructive lesson. It might be worth noting that whatever your parents did when they got angry, you probably were scared. This emotion is chemical in nature. It is the norepinephrine, feels good. Lasts a very short time. It's mislabeled by most of us and is socially unacceptable to express unless justified. Next, Alfred turned to the blackboard and pointed to the word grief, and I listened. The next major emotion is grief or sadness. I'm going to be quicker with these last two emotions as I want to get onto the bigger lesson about feelings, he said, and he continued. The chemical involved with grief is prolactin, and it is a neurotransmitter in the brain. Rather than the hormone injected into the bloodstream, this piece of information will come in handy later. One interesting thing about prolactin is that its production decreases in males somewhere after the age of 10. What I think this means is that there is a chemical basis for some of the difficulty men have in weeping. On the other hand, I think men generally have a lot more to weep about. The feeling of grief functions to help you adjust to loss, when anger helps push through blocks to get what we want. Grief is there to help adjust to life when we don't have what we want. Humans are strongly capable of developing desires. Grief is there to allow you to let go. A person who cannot express grief is hamstrung in their ability to let go. Most indigenous cultures believe that Western human culture will fall apart because they teach people not to grieve. They believe grieving is essentially too healthy. They believe grieving is essential to healthy life, both for the individual and for the culture. Prolactin is produced by the midbrain, and its effect on the other functions of the brain are enormous. Generally speaking, when a person weeps, they lose control of themselves, their bodies, their consciousness. When they finish, they come back to the world. A person should never drive a car while crying, as they are likely to crash. Grief is an emotion of losing control. And when you grieve of one thing, it seems you grieve for all losses. Thus, crying at a sad movie can help you adjust to the loss of things in your life. Many men are taught at an early age that crying is for sissies. They are mocked for sadness and told to keep a stiff upper lip. Heck, I'll give you something to cry about. Many girls are taught that it's okay to cry, but it's not okay to get mad. The result is that many human females that I've met tend to cry when they get angry. And now let's look at the joy, the turtle said. The last major emotion is joy or happiness. The primary chemical in pleasure or joy is endorphins, yet another brain chemical. Endorphins go directly to work in the brain and strongly affect the thinking process. I imagine the purpose of joy is to give us all something to live for. Joy signals that all is going well. I remember a picture I saw as a kid that said, "Man is the only animal that doesn't know that the purpose of life is to take joy." I contend that the purpose of joy is to show us the way to our purpose. I think it's amazing to note that most human children learn early that parents don't want them to be happy. Kids are designed for high levels of joy, but most times you see them being told to be quiet. Kids are built for hardware stores and to run up and down the aisles, pulling things off the shelves. Kids are designed to run around restaurants yelling and laughing. One thing I was asked, how do you take a kid to a nice restaurant and have peace? I replied, you don't. Kids aren't designed for that. Kids are designed for campgrounds and parks. Joy is noisy. Learn to live with it. Because endorphins are produced in the midbrain, like grief, the emotion of joy is an emotion of losing control as well. People who are laughing very hard can get into car accidents as the brain is slightly incapable or incapacitated when they are when in very high joy. Perhaps that is why people hold on to each other during lovemaking, so they don't fly off into outer space. With that, Alfred handed out the next paper on feelings. I took it in my hand and looked at it. There, written in bold black letters, were the 4 major emotions that I had been wondering about all my life. These are the ones that have been giving me so much trouble in understanding them. So you can imagine, I looked closely at the chart and intended to study them carefully. Then the bell rang. Yes, a school bell. Ring, 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 it went, buzzing its electrical tune in the air. Alfred stopped short. Good timing, he said. We have come to the end of our class. Class dismissed.